Welcome back to Town Meeting. We're talking about rock cocaine tonight. Joining us right now is the former chief of the National Drug Enforcement Agency. Please join me in meeting Peter Bensinger. Excuse me. Is Seattle, we left with the statement that Seattle is considered to be one of the crack capitals of the United States. Is that an accurate assessment?
It is. Seattle is one of many cities that are becoming inundated with cocaine and crack cocaine, one of 20. And the worst is yet to come.
And Seattle's right up there.
Seattle's up there. It may not have the quantity of a New York or a Los Angeles, a Houston, but it is certainly a major problem here and is going to probably get worse. Let me give you an example. 5 years ago, a total of 25 tons of total cocaine was imported into the United States. This year, there'll be 150 tons. And when you're talking about crack, as the sergeant pointed out, you're talking about cocaine that is 4 to 5 times more powerful than the cocaine that is snorted up through the nostrils.
Well, why is that level, that amount of drug getting into the country? I mean, we're supposed to have agencies that are supposed to stop that from coming into our borders.
Ken, they're pulling out the coffee trees in Bolivia, Peru, and Colombia and planting coca. And the raw material availability has continued to increase. The purity has gone up. The price has gone down. You can buy a crack pellet for $10.
Is it easy to smuggle that kind of a drug? Is it easy to smuggle drugs into the United States?
It is by no means a mystery.
It's terribly easy.
It is easy for a couple of reasons. There's not much punishment for the users. The drug dealers would be more frightened if the people they were selling to were going to jail. I don't know the Seattle stats, and the sergeant may be able to respond personally, and I'd encourage him to do so. But in New York City, there were 57,000 felony arrests for narcotics last year. Guess how many people spent more than 30 days in jail? 3,000.
Sergeant, how does that stack up to Seattle?
Well, certainly there are substantial numbers of arrests that don't lead to anyone being in prison, and that's an unfortunate aspect of it. We would probably have divergent views in terms of the efficacy of just booking everybody that uses a little bit of dope.
Well, my position is that you need to have a certainty of punishment. And I'm not saying everybody has to go to Walla Walla, but I am saying if somebody is breaking the drug laws, there should be a penalty, whether it is a fine, whether it is a penalty that requires weekends coming to court. There should be some dissuading element of using drugs.
Well, before we sentence them, let's first talk about catching them. What are we doing to catch them here in Seattle, Chuck? Is the Seattle Police Department, is the Tukwila Police Department, Tacoma, Bellevue, whatever jurisdiction you want to address, but you're from Seattle, so you can address that best. Mm-hmm. Is the department doing all that it can and should?
No.
Succinct answer, but why not then?
Well, we're climbing back out of the dark ages in terms of recognizing what narcotics, drugs, and the abuse of them are all about in terms of the total crime picture. For a lot of years in this town, we've tended to identify that drugs may be victimless in their abuse and like that, and that there isn't much attachment to the whole spectrum of crime. So you have had for a lot of years in this town about 8 or 10 narcotics detectives expected to confront all of this. Meanwhile, the cop on the corner drinking his cup of coffee and writing his burglary report is so often oblivious to that dope house down the street. He doesn't see it as his job. And our sense of it is that that has to change. You know?
All right. This lady said that she knew of a cocaine house, rock cocaine house, operating out of her neighborhood. Did you call police about that?
No.
Okay. But if you had, what would have happened if she called up the Seattle Police Department and said, right 3 doors down from me is a rock cocaine house?
It would still depend on which precinct she called. But let me give you a sense of the dynamics yesterday and today. Before, she might well have gotten a disinterested clerk with no real sense of where that information should go, or a beleaguered detective in narcotics that had heard 150 such complaints that month, and not much could have been done given that that's one isolated place. You've got 500,000 people in this town and a lot of residences. But increasingly, we're seeing that those indicators have to be capitalized on. We're taking and cataloging all the indicators of this kind of activity. We're trying the classic police approach, which would probably be to put an informant in, make a buy, or send a police agent through, or some such.
How long is that going to take? She calls you up on Monday, hypothetically, and let's say it falls within the precinct you're discussing. She calls you up on Monday and says, there's a crack house operating here. It's been operating for the past month. Can you do something about it? Now, how long is it going to take the police department to get around to doing something about it?
In historical terms, it has often taken weeks into months, into years. In some cases, in many cases, nothing has been done. Nothing ever has been done in some of these cases. If there were only one place like that in Seattle, you could probably get same-day service from us. The sad fact of the matter is every precinct and every sector and every beat in each of those sectors is confronted with this problem.
Ken, let me just add to that. As head of DEA, that's the Federal Drug Enforcement Administration, federal agents, we had 2,000 agents. There are about 2,400 now, worldwide, combating a $100 billion problem. There are more policemen on Capitol Hill than there are DEA agents. And there are more fugitives by 1,000 who've been arrested out on the streets than there are agents in place to make additional arrests. And the young lady that stood up, who you asked, would she report a crime, she's indicative of 50% of the crimes that occur in any major city. Because out of 100 major crimes, 50 go unreported. There are 20 arrests, 12 indictments, 6 people go to trial, 3 are found guilty, and 1.5 go to prison.
With all due respect, with what you have just said and with what Sergeant Pillon has said, it does not exactly instill faith in the community to depend on law enforcement to react to the complaints and do something about the concern.
Because the resources that have been given to law enforcement and the resources that have been given to schools in terms of education and prevention have been woefully inadequate. We spend $1 billion a day on national defense. We spend $2 billion a year to combat the whole drug problem.
Well, I think that we should go to the grade schools and the junior highs and give them drug information, tell them about the drugs, because that's most of the places where the kids take their first drug. And if they know more about crack and pot and stuff, then they'll be more quick to say no, because they'll know the long-term effects. Sometimes you take drugs and you don't even know what you're taking.
You don't? That's one thing that's guaranteed. Anytime you take an illegal drug, you know a couple of things. One, you don't know the purity, you don't know what's in it, you don't know who sold it to the person giving it to you, and you don't know the impact it's going to have on your body.
I'll add a footnote to that, Ken. At a time when there was a little bit of a heroin panic in this town in the mid-'70s, and several of my friends in central Seattle couldn't get their hands on the package, there just wasn't any dope around, they started experimenting, and one facsimile for heroin got to be decon and oatmeal. They were cooking up rat poison and oatmeal and then selling it on the street corners to their hapless colleagues in the underworld.
Another problem is that you say we report it and then you come out to the houses. From personal experience, when the police came out to the houses, nothing happened until somebody got shot, and then something happened, and still nothing has been done about the problem in the neighborhood.
Right.
Had you made phone calls regarding?
And I saw the shooting, and nothing's still been done in that neighborhood.
Is the cocaine house that you reported initially, is that still operating to your knowledge?
No, but there's like 4 others up there, and they know about it, and they don't do anything about it. And then when something happens, when we say something to them, they say, we're working on it, we're working on it.
And yet you're one of the more aggressive pursuers in this whole problem, Sergeant Pillon, are you not?
Right.
We don't ask you to be immodest about that fact, but you're known for your aggressive techniques. Are you a rarity?
I think perhaps I represent like the hood ornament and change that is coming in the Seattle Police Department. I've had some chance to break ground and kind of forge a new path here. The sense that I may have extended when I said very candidly, no, nothing had been done, and too many times things haven't been done, was not to suggest I'm content with that. As a matter of fact, there's a quiet revolution going on in the Seattle Police Department now. You see, too long the police have been caught up in this narrow window of if we can't go out and charge somebody in the course of an investigation, that is, imprison them or some such, let's let them be. And you see that the spectrum approach we've employed at the South Precinct that's brought us here into the environs of West Seattle lately is this notion, that if the classic police means don't work, if there are too many targets or the informants can't get there, the buy can't be made, then it's time for the cop on the corner to resurrect some old, simple talents and skills. And we end up on the front porch of those places, hammering on the door, confronting the crooks, and defeating them in that way. Because if it becomes clear to them, that they can't conduct that kind of activity any longer without some police intervention, very quickly they'll fold the tent and go away. They may well go elsewhere, and it is incumbent upon the cop in the next beat then to be equipped to defeat them in that same way. What you see yonder there is an example of that sort of police strategy. There's a guy dealing, in this case, they're dealing cocaine and marijuana to youngsters around High Point. And those kids, 14 and 15-year-old kids, haven't any money, of course, to buy the cocaine. So they're doing your houses and your cars, and they're coming up with what you can see. The guns, the VCRs, and this is a modest stash out of one rock house. This is like 10% of some of the better hits that we've gotten. The point is this: we set up surveillance on this individual once we learned via those complaints and our own observations and word from our informants. We went there with a member of our street team, the new Seattle Police Narcotics Street Team, which is a resource for us, and we passed them through there. And this guy is selective. He deals only to the 14 to 18-year-old kids around there that he knows very well, or someone that's introduced by one of them. We couldn't do the guy on that basis. We're also not allowed to use 14 to 18-year-olds as snitches, informants, and such.
Do you cut corners, Sergeant Pillon?
In which sense?
Well, in the sense that you cut through what might be judged as the bureaucracy of the police.
We certainly cut those corners, but there's a central issue that
Do you
gets
bend
raised.
rules?
No.
The rules we won't bend are the lawful requirements of the police to conduct themselves properly when they do these things. What we do is go that step beyond in determination. And to finish this story, we sat and watched the night about a week back, and they were doing dope right there, right then. Unfortunately, where we were, we couldn't intercept the customers and hopefully come up with some of what these guys were dealing. So we couldn't write a warrant and do the place. Typically, that's when the cops fold the tent and they go away. We stayed and we waited, and we picked these crooks off. We confronted them. We told them we knew what they were doing and that they were out of business. I'm in uniform and all these rips. One of my partners, Dwayne Brown, is in back. Typically, he's a detective. He'll be out of uniform, and I use a couple cops that way, too. We just went right down their throat. Got a consent to search when the guy understood. I wasn't trying, knowing that I couldn't, to put him in jail, but simply was going to defeat that effort right then, right there, and rescue that neighborhood. And there's the end product.
Essentially, you bluffed him.
Well, I could extend the threat that I represent to other means. That is, I would be persistent. I couldn't do him right then, and I did bluff him a little bit.
When we come back, we are going to talk to a man who says that some of our efforts to crack down on this problem may be very well infringing on our rights as citizens. We will talk to him when we come back. Stay with us.